Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the Van Buren Variety Show. Certainly glad you're here. Hope everybody's doing great. I am Bob Van Buren, your host, so glad you're here. For those of you that are just now discovering the show, or haven't tuned in before or seen the previous episodes, each week I have an individual guest on to talk about a different topic. Could be a hobby, it could be a how-to segment, entertainment, their profession. So it's all right here. So it's a great learning experience. So if you haven't already, and you've seen the show before, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel because there is actually a special show tomorrow that I normally don't do a show the very next day, but tomorrow there is a special episode, and I think you're going to get quite a few laughs out of it as well. So I'm not going to break out what the topic's about, but just tune in tomorrow and you'll see for sure. Tonight, though, we have a really great serious topic. We always talk about the unknown. What is out there that we don't know about yet? And there's mysteries out there. Do we really know everything that exists on this planet? Whether that be an animal, a creature, an unknown, whatever. So we really don't know. For example, if you remember years and years ago, there was a tsunami that happened in the Indian Ocean. There was an earthquake, I believe, off the coast of Japan. And Malaysia and a lot of the countries over there, islands, were just swept away by the tsunami that happened afterwards. When they were cleaning up the mess, they found a lot of sea creatures strewn about on the beach and the streets. They had washed with the water. And scientists had no idea that those creatures ever existed. They were so far in the bottom of the ocean, they were unknown. And so the scientists and the zoologists had to actually classify these brand new creatures that no one knew anything about. In fact, you can Google it and see it for yourself. There was a lot of interesting sea creatures that, again, were unknown up to that point. And so we're going to be talking about unknown creatures today that we're still mysterious about. And we need people to write books and tell us more about what they've learned from their own research. So without further ado, let me bring my guest on tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to present Leah Fisher. She's going to be talking about her research in cryptozoology. I knew I was going to mess that up. Cryptozoology. I'll say it in a minute. So,
it is a tongue twister.
Leah, welcome to the Van Buren Variety Show. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's kind of just jump into it. Tell us, for those that don't know, and maybe even me that not that familiar with it, what is cryptozoology?
Yeah, so cryptozoology is a word that derives from the word cryptid, and in Latin, cryptid means hidden animal. And cryptozoology basically means the study of hidden animals. As I like to tell children, it is the study of legendary animals that might be real.
Yeah, that like I said, there might be real. And like I talked about the sea creatures earlier, we don't know. And so how long have you been in cryptozoology?
So I got into cryptozoology, I want to say about 12 years ago. I write children's books, and I was trying to think of a new topic to write about. And I happened to read an article in the newspaper about the actor Charlie Sheen.
Yes.
And this was when he was going through his very exuberant time period, I'll call it. And I read an article in the paper about him putting together a hunting party to go to Alaska to find the Otter Man. And I thought, who is the Otter Man and what does Charlie Sheen want with him? And so I started researching the Otter Man, and I came upon the word cryptid. And I had never heard the word cryptid. I didn't know what cryptids were. And when I was a kid, I was really into myths and mythology. And I thought cryptids and cryptozoology would be a really fun topic to write about for kids. And once I started researching Bigfoot and cryptids, this whole world opened up to me, and I kind of went down the rabbit hole of research.
Oh, that's very interesting indeed. Absolutely. So did you've geared your books more towards children in a particular age group or grade?
Yeah, so my books are like humorous adventure novels for about 8 to 12-year-olds or kids in grades about 3 through 5.
Interesting. Let me bring up one of the books that you've written. In fact, it was the first book you wrote. kind of give us a kind of a rundown of this one right here.
Yeah, so that is The Cryptid Catcher, and that is my debut novel. It came out in 2018, and again, it's a humorous adventure novel about a boy named Clivo Wren, and
Okay.
he discovers that his father has secretly been training him to become a cryptid catcher,
Oh,
meaning
wow.
he needs to travel the world and find these animals that should not exist and protect them from the bad guys, because there is one cryptid who is very special, and the bad guys are trying to get this cryptid in order to take over the world.
Mhm.
So it's an adventure tale about a 13-year-old learning how to find animals that shouldn't exist, where they're located, how to find them, how to protect them.
It kind of sounds like too, like you're telling a story, this humorous story, but in a way, you're kind of teaching the children as well. This is kind of what may be out there. It's, in other words, they're learning, but maybe they're too much busy having fun, not knowing that they're learning something.
Yes, yes, isn't that the best way?
Uh-huh.
And that's why I love teaching kids about cryptozoology, because it may seem like it's a silly endeavor. A lot of people put cryptozoology into the pseudoscience realm. People call it a
Yeah.
pseudoscience of ufology, ghost hunting. I consider all of them sciences. And I think cryptozoology is a science, because how else are you going to prove the existence of Bigfoot unless you use a scientific method?
Hmm.
And so I believe that cryptozoology can act as a gateway science, because if you're teaching kids about how to look for Bigfoot, they're having so much fun that they may not even realize that they're learning about the scientific method.
That's great. And I like the artwork. Did you do the artwork on this book too?
I wish I did the artwork, but no, the cover is done by a fabulous artist in Los Angeles named Lisa K. Weber.
Hmm.
And she does a lot of graphic novel art. And she is just, as you can see, spectacular as an artist.
Because I like that picture. He's doing a selfie with all these creatures.
Yes. And the funny thing is that, I grew up in the 80s. So I grew up before cell phones.
Me too.
And yeah, yeah. And I really didn't want cell phones in my book. So I do have him. The main character has one cell phone that can get in touch with one special person. And
Sure.
so when they put
Okay.
it on the cover, I was like, no, I don't want the cell phone. Because I kind of like the old adventure spy aspect
Hmm.
of life, where you would do spying and adventures without a cell phone. I feel like a cell phone took away a lot of the intrigue of spy novels, and so I try to get rid of a lot of the cell phones in my book.
Did you base the character in your book on like a real person, a real boy that you knew, or just someone that you just thought about, you made up on your own, or what were you influenced by anything or anybody?
Yeah, the main character, I feel I write kind of similar to who I am as a person,
Hmm.
and I have a harder time actually visualizing the main character. Um, but I have a really easy time creating all of the fun sidekicks. For whatever reason, I feel like my main character is always the very serious moral center, but then I create these wacky sidekicks who, of course, have to help him on his journey.
Sure.
And I modeled one of my characters, Charles, who I just love to write. I modeled him after Napoleon Dynamite.
I
Um,
remember that movie. Yes.
yeah, I mean, I just picture Napoleon Dynamite, and I'm like, and there's Charles. So it's Napoleon Dynamite, but as a 13-year-old.
How long did it take you to write this book, this first book?
So the book itself, well, it's actually really funny. I first wrote the story as an adult novel.
Hmm.
I was brand new to writing. I didn't have a book deal. I didn't know much about the publishing world or genres. I just thought, let me write a fun story. And like I said, I grew up in the 80s. So I grew up with uh, Stallone and Schwarzenegger. So I grew up with the Rambo movies, the Commando movies. And so I grew up with these kind of fun soldiery movies. And I thought,
Hmm.
well,
Oh, yeah.
let me write a book about a soldier traveling the world looking for dragons. Um, And I was able to get a literary agent from that. And he said, Leah, this really is not a book for adults. No adult is going to read this book. And I was like, really? Because I'm an adult and I wrote it and I'd
Yeah.
read it.
I think I would have read it too. Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, do you mind writing it for the young adult age group, which is basically 13 to 18? And all I knew about young adult novels is that you need to have romance in it. And so
A
I
little
wrote,
bit.
yeah. So I took my soldier adult main character and turned him into a 16-year-old boy traveling the world looking for dragons while wishing he had a girlfriend. And it was awful. It was awful. And my agent said, Leah, can you write it again, but for the 8 to 12 audience? And so then I made it into a 13-year-old boy traveling the world. And I opened it up, and it was at that point that I learned all about cryptids. And so then I added in the whole cryptids, cryptozoology aspect of it. And it just naturally fit into my voice and the stories I want to tell. Because at the end of the day, I grew up, like I said, on Steven Spielberg, Indiana Jones, Rambo, just these.
Me too. Yes.
Just these fun, crazy adventures. And those are the books that I strive to write for kids.
It also sounds like you said you grew up in the 80s, so I'm going to age myself as well. It kind of sounds like almost, remember the movie The Goonies?
Oh, yes.
The kids were after the pirate's treasure and they had a big adventure. Of course, they always have to have the bad guys, trying to foil the kids. So that's what it kind of sounds like to me too. They had an adventure as well.
That's exactly right. Time Bandits, The Goonies, Princess Bride, all of these just really wholesome, magnificent movies that, stimulate fantasy and the imagination. And
E.T. even.
E.T., yes. Yeah. And I actually had one reviewer review the Cryptid Catcher, and he mentioned something about Indiana Jones. He goes, this book reads like an Indiana Jones movie. And I'm like, well, good, because I basically just took Indiana Jones and put it into this book for 13-year-olds. So I'm glad I succeeded in that.
In fact, in our live chat, Randy Gilbert said, like the never-ending story.
Never-ending story, yes.
Forgot about that one.
Randy, oh my gosh. And I just saw this video on TikTok or something, and it's this guy. I don't know if it's paragliding or parasailing, but he's floating in the sky, and he has this massive white dog in front of him. And somebody said it's the sequel to The Never-Ending Story, where the main character is all grown up, still riding on his big white beast. So,
oh, wow. Yeah.
Yes.
But so that was your first book, but now you've written another book. And so let me bring that up. So let me ask you, so is this a sequel or is this a standalone novel as well?
Yes, The Cryptid Keeper is the sequel to The Cryptid Catcher, and it is the further adventures of the main character, whose name is Clivo Wren, and he teams up with a group of young kids called the Myth Blasters, and the Myth Blasters are able to locate all of these cryptids that live around the world, and Clivo is still traveling the world looking for the cryptid that he needs to protect from the bad guys. So he's still out there trying to save the world.
Is there a time period? In other words, how much time has passed from the ending of the first novel till the beginning of The Cryptid Keeper? What has any time passed, or does it just immediately go into the next adventure?
It pretty much goes right into it, because the first book ends at the end of the school year, because even though Clivo is traveling the world looking for cryptids, he does still need to go to school. And so the first book ends at the beginning of the school year, and The Cryptid Keeper begins at the beginning of summer.
Okay. Now, I don't want to give anything part of your book away, but I'm just looking at the creatures on this cover right here.
Yeah.
Can you tell about these creatures in there? But I don't want you to tell me if it's going to give any plot points away. I want people to read the book.
I don't have to give away any plot points to tell you about these cryptids. So all of the cryptids that I have in my book are real cryptids. And I know that sounds weird to say, because cryptids are animals that have not been discovered. So how can you say that they're real? But I say that they're real, meaning that they exist in the folklore record. They exist as a legend in some sort of culture or group or society. So I did not make up any of these animals. These are all animals that you can find in legends and folk tales. So to the upper right is one of my favorite cryptids. That is the Ugly Merman. He lives in Russia.
Oh, wow.
He's a very cranky cryptid where he is known for sitting on a dam, smoking a pipe. And if you don't bring him gifts every day, he will break the dam and flood the village.
Oh, blackmail.
Blackmail, yes. He's a very manipulative cryptid. And then you can tell that, the Ugly Merman is most likely just a story from folklore. The chance of that being a real creature is probably pretty slim, but you never know. And then going to the left, that cat-faced red snake is called the Tetzel Worm.
You said you say half cat, half snake? Is what this is?
It has the body of a snake and the face of a cat.
That's kind of scary.
That is called the Tetzel Worm, and I believe that one is in Switzerland. And then
I don't want to run across that.
Yeah, no, that's like a thing of nightmares. And then to the left is, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but I believe it's the Erstwhilch. I need to relook it up and learn how to pronounce it. That's from Germany, I believe, and that is a chicken with antlers on.
Oh, wow.
And the locals would often tease someone with the legend of this chicken with antlers, in that they would take somebody into the wilderness with a blue lantern, and everybody would have a blue lantern, and they would say, hey, this creature is really drawn to the color blue. So let's go out into the woods, hold up the lantern, wander around, and wait for this creature to come and approach you. Well, they would always tell that legend to a newcomer to the village, and they'd go out on a night, everybody would spread out, and then everybody who knew the legend would go back to the pub and start drinking, and they'd wait and see how long the newcomer would hang out there with their lantern waiting for this cryptid to arrive.
Ooh.
And then finally they'd give up and go to the pub. And
sure.
So that was used as a little bit of a trickster joke. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is the blue tiger of China.
Blue tiger. Oh, China. Where that's
China.
From. Wow.
Yes.
I've never seen a blue tiger. Wow, that's interesting.
It's really just a blue tiger.
Did you have the same person draw this picture as they did on the first novel? Was the same person?
Yes, this is again Lisa K. Weber.
She's very talented.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
She does an amazing job. I was so amazed with what she did with the artwork.
So how often do you go to the schools? I mean, do you present what you can present? Do they contact you, or how do you? Is it a whole day thing? Are you there for a week? Kind of how you present this to the schools?
Yeah, it all depends. So I travel the country doing author visits at schools, libraries, and Bigfoot conferences. And I do my presentation called Cryptozoology for Kids, where I teach kids about legends, folk tales, and the search and discovery of cryptids, because we have discovered cryptids. These are not just animals of our imagination, but many of them do make the transition from legend into reality. And because they are proven to exist through science. So yeah, schools contact me. And of course, during, the past year or so, it's been a lot of Zoom presentations, but I'll go in and I'll do anywhere from 1 to 4 presentations a day in different classrooms or in the gym. And I think the teachers really love the presentation as well, because who doesn't want to learn about the search for Bigfoot? Who doesn't want to learn about the most recent evidence gathered for the Loch Ness Monster?
It's an adventure. And kids like adventure for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I go to Bigfoot conferences as well. And again, speak about cryptozoology for kids, which, usually there's more adults there. And so I more title it Cryptozoology 101. So it's cryptozoology for beginners, just a general introduction to the search and discovery of legendary animals.
And how, for the most part, have the kids been real receptive when you present your presentation?
Oh, so receptive. Yeah.
Really?
Kids, yeah, because, in this day and age where we have our phones and we have Google, and you can just type a
YouTube.
question in. YouTube,
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yep.
Or when you have Alexa, where you can just shout out any question and have somebody just immediately give you the answer. I feel like kids might be growing up with the idea that there's no more mystery left in the world, that
That's
we've
true.
discovered everything that there is to discover on planet Earth. And now we have to go to Mars to find something new, that the frontier is now in space. And I think to teach kids that we haven't discovered everything yet.
I agree.
There
I
is
agree.
still an undiscovered frontier on Earth. There's a few scientists who believe that only 1.5% of life on Earth has been discovered.
Oh, wow.
Then
Interesting.
now, I mean, of course, there's gazillions of things we haven't discovered in the oceans, and microbes and
Absolutely.
little tiny things, but we are still discovering 1 to 2 new mammal species a year. So it is not out of the realm of possibility that there is a creature and a hidden animal as large as Bigfoot wandering around that we have not discovered. It is not at all beyond the realm of possibility. So when I tell kids how much there is to discover on Earth, they get really excited about cryptozoology and the search for legends.
I bet you in that age group, I bet you got a lot of interesting questions too, don't you?
So many questions. Yes. And, mainly kids just start throwing creatures at me from books that they've read, and they want to know if they're cryptids. A lot of the more popular ones, like Slender Man, they say, is Slender Man a
Oh,
cryptid?
yeah.
One child asked me if Santa Claus was a cryptid. And I
Oh, it was a
said,
cryptid.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I had to think about it for a minute. And I said, well, you know what? A cryptid is a hidden animal. Humans are animals. Santa Claus is hidden. He hasn't been proven to exist through science. So technically, if you go by the definition, Santa Claus is a cryptid.
That's an interesting question. I never would even thought about that. I probably would, if it was me, I probably would have had the deer in the headlights. Like, oh no, what do I say?
Right. So mainly the kids stump me because they bring up all of these different creatures that they've read about in comic books or, their stories. And they just want to know, basically, is it possible that this creature could be real? And
like Godzilla or something,
like Godzilla, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. So the thing about cryptozoology, and I fudge this a little bit with the kids just for the sake of imagination, but true cryptozoologists do follow the zoology part of the word, meaning that in order for a cryptid to most likely be real, it does need to follow the zoological record, meaning there does need to be some sort of fossil record that would make it possible for this creature to exist. In other words, we're not really looking for creatures that aren't a derivative of what we have seen before. But I fudge that a little bit with fairies or whatnot. I like to open the world up a little bit more to fantasy and imagination. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: now, you've written the books, which I myself would love to read them too. So where have you, or how have you done your research? What kind of research have you done on your own, like out in the field, or have you talked to other people maybe that's had the same, had an experience, so to speak, or kind of your studies?
Yeah, I've done a couple of different ways to go about it. One of the ways is I've definitely studied the work of other cryptozoologists. When my books were coming out, I was introduced to Lauren Coleman, the founder of the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine. And he actually read my books. And
oh, really? That's an honor.
Yeah, it was a great honor, and really taught me, he gave me feedback on my books, and this was when I was just beginning to write about cryptozoology, and I wasn't really taking it seriously. I didn't know a lot about the true study of them. And he did some fact checking with me, and he basically taught me that, hey, you don't need to make stuff up about these cryptids. There is a story record. There is a legend record of these animals. So you don't need to be making stuff up. There's plenty of real information or real stories out there about them. So I studied his work. I started traveling to different Bigfoot conferences and listening to other people's presentations. I went to the International Cryptozoology Museum to learn about that. So I did a lot of reading on my own, speaking with other cryptozoologists. I mean, that's the best way to learn, just speak to other people in the field. And now I work at the Sasquatch Outpost, which is a Bigfoot museum in Bailey, Colorado. I'm located in Colorado. And so we have a Bigfoot museum there that talks about the search and the evidence of Bigfoot. But really, just working there, having people come in who are Bigfooters, who tell me their Bigfoot stories, who tell me their Bigfoot research, that's been one of the best educational aspects of working there. And, you know, friends who I've met at the Bigfoot conferences around the country travel around and they stop by the museum and we chat cryptozoology. So that's been very fun. And I have done just a couple of out in the field experiences of going out with Bigfooters and having them teach me how to do footprint casts, where to look for footprints, how to do tree knocks, what to look for at night. So that's been, of course, amazing as well.
Now, you mentioned that museum in Colorado, but you also mentioned earlier Cryptozoology Museum. Is that the same one? Is that also in Colorado?
Nope. The International Cryptozoology Museum is in Portland, Maine.
Portland, Maine.
And that is, yes, and that was founded by Loren Coleman, and he's been a cryptozoologist for decades. He's one of the founding fathers of cryptozoology. So this is his museum that has all the information you would ever want to know about cryptozoology.
And the Bigfoot Museum was where in Colorado?
That's in Bailey, Colorado.
Bailey, Colorado. Okay.
It is a cute little small tourist town up in the mountains. So if you're ever going through Bailey, Colorado, stop by the museum, say hi, and talk to Jim, the owner, because he will take you out Bigfooting, take you out during the day, or even take you out at night. And he is a true Bigfooter. He knows so much about Bigfoot, and you will have an amazing experience out in the Rockies looking for Sasquatch.
Oh, wow. That sounds intriguing just in itself.
Yes.
Let's talk about, in fact, I'm going to bring that up in our chat now. Let's talk a bit about your website. This is your website right here, ladies and gentlemen. It's www.leahfisher.com. So what actually would people see by going to your website?
Yeah, so if you're curious about the books that I've written, I have information about my books on there. I have information about where I'm speaking. If I'm speaking at a Bigfoot conference, you can find it on there. I also teach writing workshops about how to write the adventure novel is one of the workshops that I teach a lot of. So if you're curious about how to write your own adventure novel, I listed on there when and where I'll be teaching. And then I do have just a little bit of cryptozoology information on there. And then there's also a contact form if you want to reach out and ask me any questions about anything or get in touch with me to do a school visit, either in person or virtually.
Oh, you can do it virtually as well. Oh, that's really interesting. Wow, this day and time, sometimes that's kind of wise,
Yes.
So, okay, but they can also order your book from there as well.
Yep. If you go to the book section, you can find a way to order my books on there and how to get even signed copies of my books. So with the holidays coming up, if you want signed copies, you can go to the book section and get information about that.
Can people also contact you through your website in case they have their own story that they want to share with you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Or they can even share that information with the Sasquatch Outpost at sasquatchoutpost.com because we're always collecting Bigfoot experiences or other cryptid experiences through the museum, or you can just send it to me through my website. Absolutely.
In your research, you said you've about 12 years now. Have you seen people, have you had people seem like they're willing to come to you and tell you their story? Like, hey, this is what I found. This is what I think. and maybe wanting your opinion on what they went through.
Oh, very much so. I mean, every day when I'm at the Bigfoot Museum, people come in and tell me about their Bigfoot encounters, their Bigfoot experiences, and also their Bigfoot theories of what they think Bigfoot is. Because there are so many different theories of what Bigfoot might be. And right now, there's kind of two camps of the Bigfooting world. For lack of better terms, people call it either the ape camp, meaning that you believe that Bigfoot is a flesh and blood animal, an undiscovered ape species living in North America. And then there's what they call the woo camp. And those are folks who believe that Bigfoot has something to do with UFOs, is maybe interdimensional, is maybe more of the paranormal world.
I've heard that.
Yeah, so those are kind of the two camps, and there can be a lot of friction between the two camps. People are
Really?
they believe very strongly in what they believe about Bigfoot, and whereas I'm just open to all of it. And so I love when people come into the museum and tell me either their paranormal beliefs about Bigfoot or their scientific beliefs about Bigfoot. And people come in and tell me new theories every day that I haven't heard from anybody, even major Bigfooters at these Bigfoot conferences. People are always coming up with theories of the existence of Bigfoot. It's fascinating.
We've heard, all over the country and all over the world of cryptids and the existence of. But in your experience, for the people that have come to you with their stories, have you seen especially this country, a section of America that's more prominent as far as the stories that you're getting? Like West Coast, East Coast, South, North. Is there any particular place that stands out more in the stories that people tell you?
Not really. According to the BFRO, the Bigfoot Research Organization, Bigfoot has been seen in every state in America except for Hawaii, because apparently he can't swim and no one will sell him an airplane ticket.
You don't like the hula, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So Bigfoot has been seen in every state. And so when people come and tell me their Bigfoot stories, I've had people come and tell me sightings that they had in Russia.
Oh, wow.
Russia's a huge place for Bigfoot sightings. So yeah, like you wouldn't think that there would be a lot of Bigfoot sightings in Florida, but there's a ton. And Bigfoot is known as the skunk ape down there. Ton of Bigfoot sightings in Texas, Oklahoma. And then, of course, you have the Pacific Northwest rainforest there, which is, Bigfoot country. So ton of sightings there. And even in Colorado has a massive amount of Bigfoot sightings. And so, yeah, just whenever people travel through the museum, no matter where they're from, there's usually some interest or actual experience with Bigfoot that they've had.
Of course, the prominent one for me, the one I grew up with, I always heard about Falk, Arkansas. I mean, that was the movie, just put that on the map. And so when I was later on, I was really shocked, a teenager in my 20s, that there were other sightings, in other parts of the country. And I thought, oh, it's not just in that little town. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that was what was so exciting for people, is because for many years, Bigfoot was just associated with the Pacific Northwest rainforest. And so then to suddenly have these experiences more in the southern part of the country, it kind of just blew open the Bigfoot legend and made it more of a nationwide phenomena.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, we're not, as you said before, people have different opinions. Whether it could be a flesh and blood creature, whether it's paranormal or alien, and we respect all opinions, obviously.
Absolutely.
So, with that in mind, can you share with us what you lean more towards to believe, or can you share that, or no?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to.
Okay.
I definitely land on I'm open to anything. I certainly lean more towards the ape camp, because of my work with children and going into schools and going into libraries and teaching them about the search for Bigfoot, I do need to make it very science-based.
Sure.
like I said, Lauren Coleman taught me that cryptozoology can be a gateway science for kids and teach kids about other life sciences. Because again, how will we discover Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster except through the scientific method? So I really do need to keep it science-based, because I think if I start talking about how Bigfoot was beamed down from a UFO, I might not be invited back to schools. Maybe.
You never know, depending on.
Depending on. But in my own opinions, I'm really open to anything, because I do believe that there are things that we just don't know about. And I always reference the black hole in space, because inside the event horizon, we don't know what happens to the very fabric of space and time. It could speed up, it could slow down. So is it possible that there's some kind of phenomena on Earth where time can speed up, slow down, that Bigfoot can cross through? I don't know. I don't tout that theory. It's not a big thing that I believe in, but I'm open to the possibility that that could be out there.
Well, let me ask you this. We've heard, back and forth stories, about the demeanor of cryptids and Bigfoot in general. So in your own research and from what you're hearing from people, would you say that this creature is friendly to humans? Is he hostile to humans, or is he pretty much indifferent? What would you say in your research?
Yeah, I mean, speaking to fellow cryptozoologists and speaking to people who have actually had experiences with Bigfoot, the main through line seems to be that Bigfoot, does not attack humans, that Bigfoot is curious about humans, but that Bigfoot can be very territorial, meaning that if you are walking through the woods, if you are sitting around your campfire, one of the common things we hear about is that you will get pebbles thrown at you or pine cones thrown at you. Just kind of hey, just to let you know we're here and you're in our space.
A little hint to kind of move on, maybe.
Yeah,
right?
a little bit like, hey. Now, Bigfoot is big enough that he could throw a boulder at you, but I haven't heard in all of my research and all of my experience with eyewitnesses hearing of anyone getting truly injured by a rock. It's just more of a, hey, we're here kind of thing. A lot of stories of if you are around a campfire, that they stay just out of the line of sight of the fire. So they stay back in the darkness a little bit where you can see their eye shine, but they don't approach so far that you can actually see them. So in general, with Bigfooters, there is a great respect for Bigfoot in that there is not a desire to antagonize him, because most people say that he is between 7 to 9 feet tall.
Yes, I've heard that.
And could be an ape species. So you wouldn't walk up to a silverback gorilla,
a bear or whatever.
A bear, and so there is a great respect for appreciating that if Bigfoot is not a human, but more of an animal, and that's another discussion, is Bigfoot more human or is Bigfoot more ape? But if Bigfoot is more, on the quote unquote wild animal side, you want to respect him the way you would another wild animal and respect their space and not antagonize them.
And he's just having a trait that any other mammal or human would have. I mean, if he's protecting his territory. I mean, you go out into the wild or the jungles, like lions. I mean, they have their dens and they don't want you near their cubs. And I'm even thinking, kind of in a not really a funny note, but seriously, how many times have we walked by a tree minding our own business? Here comes the mockingbird swooping at us, pecking us on the head. They've probably got a nest up there. They're telling you, hey, get away from this tree. So it's no different than what, another animal, even a human being. We want to protect our homes.
Absolutely.
Any stranger just coming and camping out on our porch,
Right, exactly. So that's, that's the same thing with Bigfoot. Just kind of like, hey, this is my space. I'm here, and don't intrude too much.
In your research, Leah, how long can these creatures live Is there any way to gel that, or are there any? Should I say, is there any theories on on their life longevity?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to remember if I've heard that theory from anybody. I honestly can't remember if I've heard a theory of how long they can live. I know that true cryptozoologists would study, how big and how much they weigh and
Sure.
what the average lifespan would be for something that large, just in terms of how many calories it needs a day, um, how that could lead to life expectancy. And I know that there are cryptozoologists who definitely research that, but I can't recall off the top of my head a theory of how old they might, what their lifespan is.
I see. And we've seen cast. At least I've seen some cast of the foot. Actually, there's lots of cast out there. How big are these feet? About?
I have seen casts that that would be appropriate to a 7 to 9 foot individual. So they are, I guess if you would take the football player's Shaq, his shoe.
Oh yeah, sure.
Probably larger than that.
He has a special order his shoes.
Yeah, exactly. Bigfoot needs special ordered Nikes. But what's interesting about the footprint cast, if for people who are wondering, like, what's so great about a Bigfoot footprint cast, apart from just that it's so big, well, there are other evidence that you can gather from the cast. And Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who I just spoke with at the Texas Bigfoot Conference, he is a professor of anthropology at Idaho State University, and he has done a lot of investigative work on these footprint casts. And he has talked about and he truly believes that Bigfoot exists. And he comes at it from a very scientific background. But he mentions that some things that you can look at on the cast are a mid-tarsal break, which is the human foot. When you lift up your heel, you crease at the toes. Whereas an ape foot, if you lift up your heel, you crease in the mid part of the foot. And so if you can see this mid-tarsal break on the footprint cast, it means that you are looking at the footprint of an ape. Another thing that they search for are dermal ridges, which is essentially a fingerprint, but on the sole of the foot. And that helps to somewhat debunk if something is fake or not, because to create a fake print with basically fingerprints on the sole of the foot, that is a very intricately designed fake, and just gives a little bit more credence to that it may be an actual footprint.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, so there's a lot of evidence that you can gather from these footprint casts.
I want to ask you a little bit more about the cryptid. We talked about Bigfoot at length, which he's the most popular and the most well known. But when we talk about cryptids, it covers an array of other knowns as well. So, Bigfoot, in my own opinion, now people can disagree, but I think Bigfoot's probably the most well known, in my opinion. But what would you say, in your opinion, Leah? What would be a close second or third as far as the cryptid unknown creatures that's maybe known maybe as much, if maybe a little bit lower than Bigfoot, would you say?
Oh, yeah. I would say there's Bigfoot and then the Loch Ness Monster.
Loch Ness Monster, of course.
Yep. Yeah. And then we've got the Yeti or the Abominable Snowman. Then we've got the Kraken, of course.
Sure.
Then mermaids are more of myth. That's the tricky thing with cryptids, is that there are I put them kind of in different categories. So there are the cryptids that are animals of legend that I think have the most likelihood of being real. And I put Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster in those categories, in that they truly follow the zoological record of something that could really exist. Then you have cryptids that are extinct animals that are actually still around, still living.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So animals are determined to be extinct if they haven't been seen for about 30 years. So then science classifies them as being extinct. Well, if all of a sudden people are seeing them, well, then they're a cryptid because they're a hidden animal, but it's an animal that should not exist, but is getting eyewitness reports. And then
I see what you're saying.
And then eventually it might be rediscovered again. And there are many animals that come out of extinction. The clouded snow leopard was recently rediscovered in Southeast Asia. And that's not a small creature.
Oh,
and it was in hiding for at least 30 years. So even if something is extinct, it really may not be. There may be a few left over. And then you have animals that truly are just folk tales. And you can usually figure out if they're a folk tale by, is it truly in the realm of possibility that this creature could exist? Does it follow the zoological record? And some of those are what are known as fearsome critters, which are stories that lumberjacks would tell each other at the end of the 19th century around the campfire.
Sure.
Most likely to entertain themselves. But a lot of these creatures that they talk about are just wild, birds that lay square eggs, horses that have shorter legs on one side, so they walk on the hill of a mountainside.
Absolutely.
So most likely those are just animals of legend. But again, you never know. Maybe they were actually seeing these creatures.
Well, you mentioned something earlier that I kind of wanted to bring into. I forgot about that. You mentioned the Abominable Snowman. Back in the 1950s, there was a movie came out. I know I'm aging myself on that as well. 1950s, it had Peter Graves in it. The name of the movie was The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas. Now, I'm sure that was a movie based on fiction, but I wanted to kind of ask you about that. See if you know, is the Abominable Snowman, is he only in the Himalayas, or is he been reported in other places? Do you know?
From what I understand, he's pretty much been seen, along the Himalayas, Bhutan, India, I believe a little bit up into Russia. And what's interesting, you mentioned the 50s with the Yeti, is that I believe it was, let me look at my notes here. Yes, in 1959, so many people were searching for the Yeti that the American embassy in Nepal had to release a press release that said that if any Americans wanted to come over to look for the Yeti, they had to get a $77 permit payable to the government of Nepal. And they had to promise not to shoot and kill the Yeti unless it was in self-defense. And if they had any evidence or anything in regards to the Yeti, even a Yeti body, they had immediately turn it over to the Nepalese government. They could not just fly it out back to America. So the government of Nepal actually had to put forth legal stipulations of what you had to do in order to search for the Yeti, because so many people were looking for the Yeti.
Was there any success, or did anybody, even if they didn't catch it, did they have people actually see it that went over there?
Oh, yeah. And there are, and now I'm going to forget the name of the gentleman. This is one of the most famous Yeti stories. But there's a gentleman, famous cryptozoologist, but he,
I'm not sure.
I believe, found someone claimed in Nepal that they had a Yeti hand, and he was able to sneak it out of Nepal in a woman's delicates case, because they knew that the customs officials would not open the case that had women's underwear in it.
Right.
So they put this shriveled hand in this woman's underwear, got it to America. Last I heard, the hand was lost, but I think he said that it might have most recently been found in some natural history museum. But apparently it's the hand of a Yeti. And it's a very
I'd love to see
story.
that myself. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So if you Google that, it's a wonderful story with a very famous cryptozoologist. And so you can look that up online.
Well, Leah, I'd like to share with my audience. You actually had a very close encounter, the closest of the closest encounter, ladies and gentlemen. Are you ready for this?
Yeah,
I'm
this was scary.
a picture of Leah's encounter, and we have a picture of it. Are you ready? Now, children, don't be too scared. And ladies and gentlemen, I mean, you might want to cover your eyes because this is a real close-up experience with Bigfoot. Right,
Yes,
Leah?
absolutely. It was terrifying.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Oh my gosh, you're right there.
I was right there. His
And you
hand was right
survived.
on me. I did. He was very sweet, very gentlemanly.
He wears a tie. I didn't know he wore a tie.
I know. He's so fashionable. And, speaking of Lauren Coleman, when he saw this photo of me with Bigfoot in the wilderness, he said, Leah, can you please, it's hunting season. Can you get out of the wilderness? Can you get out of the Bigfoot costume? You are going to be shot on sight, which is very true. So kids, adults, please do not get Bigfoot costumes and go wandering through the wilderness. It's very dangerous.
That would not be wise, even for anybody. You're not just children, man and woman alike. That would not be
yes.
to do. So that's a good. And you're holding your book too. That's
yes,
even
I'm
better.
holding my book there. Yes, I bought this fantastic Bigfoot costume, and when my books were published, I took them into the wilderness with Biggie and did some promotional photos there.
He was probably honored that you wrote about him.
Yes, he was very excited.
That is a great picture. That's absolutely great. Yes. And you brought up a good point on a serious note, not having people dress up as Bigfoot and wander out in the woods, because there is a part in the movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek, where there was a creature, a sighting, a real creature, but the guy held up on shooting it because he, in his narration, he says it might be a man dressed up as that, and that he'd be convicted of murder.
Yeah.
So,
well, here in Colorado, in Durango, Colorado, a couple years ago, the sheriff's department had to put out a press release that said, hey, we've been having a lot of Bigfoot sightings around here. If you shoot Bigfoot and it turns out to be a person in a Bigfoot costume, you will be charged with murder, not a hunting accident, not that you accidentally shot an animal, that turned out to be a person. It will be murder. And so
it's very serious.
It's very serious. So please don't traipse around in Bigfoot costumes in the woods.
Well, do you have any appearances coming up as far as schools or anywhere you're going to be speaking? Or are you going to any kind of convention in the near future?
I just wrapped up kind of my summer Bigfoot conference tour. I was in Washington, Virginia, and Texas. And now that we're heading into the holiday season, I will be doing just a lot of appearances at different holiday craft fairs. At the Denver Convention Center, the Colorado Springs Convention Center, and then up in Georgetown. And that's just where I'll be sitting there signing my books and talking to people about Bigfoot.
And now, for example, you talked about going to schools, talking to the school children. Do you go all over the country? Like if you're in Colorado, but if somebody in another state wanted you to come and speak at their school, would that be a possibility?
Absolutely. The in-person school visits are slowly getting back up and running.
I'm glad. I am so glad.
Very slowly. I'm still doing a lot of school visits virtually, which is, of course, very fun. But when I show up in person, I get to bring my Bigfoot feet and show kids how
I bet they love that.
So that's slowly getting started, doing more in-person visits.
That is awesome. And I appreciate what you're doing, Leah. That's really great because, a lot of people don't know. And people won't know unless there's people like you to inform kind of what's going on. And I like what you're doing because, we hear most time they're written books that have been written, which is no problem, but they've been written more of an adult, that would read it. But I like it that you've done it for the children to kind of spark their interest, kind of get their curiosity up. I think that's great.
Yeah, because cryptozoology offers so many things. Like I said, it offers science, it offers imagination, it offers cultural knowledge by learning about different countries' folk tales. And what I'm hoping at the end of the day is that it just gets kids reading. with so much screen time nowadays and so many games
Sure.
that kids can play, getting a child to sit down and read a book can be hard. And so I hope that by writing these really fun, escapist adventure novels, it gets even the most reluctant reader to, put their phone down and
Sure.
cozy up with a book.
Well, let me ask you, you've written 2 books now. Do you have plans of writing a third one?
I am currently, I'm hoping that the publishing gods will be kind to me, and I am in the process of seeing if I can sell some more books.
Oh, that's
And
good.
yes, and some of the ideas I have, I can't talk much about it,
Sure.
but is
Wouldn't
more of
want you
a
to.
yes, is more of a nonfiction field guide of how to teach kids to be cryptid catchers in the wilderness, how they can go into the woods and look for legendary animals.
That is awesome. Well, let me just kind of bring this up again. This was your website at leahfisher.com, and this is where people can order your book, correct?
Absolutely. Or you can also get your book from most local stores should have it, or they can order
Mm-hmm.
it for you. If you don't want to buy the book, you can always get it at your local library. If your local library doesn't have it, you can always request that they acquire it. So you can always get my book for free and read it. So there are many different ways to get my book, and they don't all cost money. You can always use your local library. But if you do want a signed copy, you can go to my website to find out how to do that.
That is awesome. And again, I appreciate what you're doing. And ladies and gentlemen, there is her website there at the bottom of the screen. I highly encourage you to go there. And again, teachers, educators, schools, anywhere, if you're interested in this, please contact her. And then I'm sure she can make arrangements for you to talk to your kids and your students. And I think that would really, use their imagination to kind of get their curiosity up. I think that'd be a great thing.
Absolutely.
So, Leah, I appreciate you being on the show tonight. I've learned a lot myself just talking to you, and would love to have you back on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is really fun.
And good luck with your new book. We'll definitely be keeping a watch on that, and we hope you have a great week. And thanks again for coming out.
Thanks for having me, Bob, and good night, everybody. Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. Just a reminder, I have a show once a week to talk to an individual guest about an individual topic. So hopefully, if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do subscribe to this channel, and you'll see some very, very interesting shows coming up. Again, I'm going to have another show tomorrow night. I normally don't have a show back to back, but if you like comedy, twisted comedy, I would say, maybe comedy at somebody else's expense, then tomorrow night's show might be for you, because we've already got some guests lined up. Some very interesting stories, if I might also add. So if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe, and make sure you like this video. It was a great presentation tonight. But for tonight, that's going to do it for the Van Buren Variety Show. I appreciate you all coming and viewing this show again, and have a great week, everybody. Good night.